The hybrid Dem, what is it? And why is Axios pitching this as if it's something new that the Democrats are doing? Well, it demonstrates yet another move away from progressivism to appeal to soft Republicans or never Trump Republicans. And again, Axios is presenting this as if it's some new and improved strategy by the Democratic Party, when in reality, the establishment Democratic Party has done everything and anything to reject progressivism in an effort to appeal to so-called moderate voters, but more importantly, as of late, to appeal to so-called never Trump Republicans or so-called soft Republicans. Now, as Alexi McHammond writes in Axios, some Democratic strategists say a hybrid candidate model is one way to try to appeal not just to the Democratic base voters, but also those like independents and soft Republicans who feel politically lost, especially after the Trump era. Now, never mind the fact that progressive voters or leftists feel politically lost without a political home to belong to. Those people don't really matter too much to the mainstream Democratic Party. It seems as though they're gonna continue moving on with a failed policy of running as Republican light. But the way Axios tries to differentiate the previous strategy from the strategy that Democratic candidates are using today is that today they're just refusing to use any and all labels, whether it's moderate or progressive. A glimpse of this played out, and Cenk, get a load of this, last summer in the special election for Ohio's 11th House district, when progressive Nina Turner didn't run with Senator Bernie Sanders' endorsement front and center. Now, that perspective is, in my opinion, inaccurate, but you are a little more involved with Nina Turner. You were certainly more involved with her campaign. So Cenk, is Alexi McHammond over at Axios correct in this interpretation?
This interpretation is absurd. So look, it's not to say that Nina Turner didn't run a little bit more of a safe contest last time, meaning that she was not as aggressive as she normally would be, but that had nothing to do with policy. And did she get Bernie Sanders' endorsement and AOC's endorsement? And did they show up? And did they put that front and center? Absolutely. Not putting it front and center is not doing a giant event with them. And they both did enormous events. So there was no effort to hide it at all. This is, look, Anna, that's just one part, as you know, of this story, which is just absurd from A to Z. That part was already crazy enough, but what they said about Terry McAuliffe is mind-numbing. I mean, it just means you don't know anything about politics. Can I just do that quote? Because, and then I'm gonna come back to some of the other examples. Because
no, we're gonna hold off on that because that, in my opinion, is the best part of this delusional piece written at Axios. So you guys are gonna have to sit tight for that. I wanted to give a few other examples, Cenk, before we go to Terry McAuliffe, and then you can go nuts. Is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so they also write about current candidates in the Democratic Party, particularly Democratic Senate candidate Mandela Barnes. He's currently the lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, and apparently he is running not as a progressive, not as a moderate. He is shying away from any and all labels. And so they write that Democratic Senate hopeful Mandela Barnes is one of the several Democratic candidates this year who aren't embracing or eschewing labels like progressive or moderate. Instead, they're campaigning with a foot in both worlds and demonstrating a new mold and potential electoral path for their embattled party. The thing that gets to me about this so-called new, it's not new, strategy is that these candidates, or more importantly, their Democratic consultants, seem to think that voters are stupid. Seem to think that voters are just like, oh no, man, like what does he say? Does he say it's progressive or does he say it's moderate? No, people want to know what you are fighting for. What do you represent? Why are you running? And it seems to be the case that Democratic candidates don't feel the need to tell you why they're running. They just shy away from anything that they might deem unpopular, when in reality, progressive policy proposals, as we know from polling, tend to perform pretty well with the overall electorate, even Republican voters in some cases. For instance, the Build Back Better agenda, when you take each provision in that agenda, which of course is now dead, each provision polls incredibly well, not just in one poll, but we've seen that play out in several different polls. But nonetheless, Mandela Barnes says this: I know that the only way we can govern at our best is when we have all of these varied interests at the table, all of these varied experiences at the table. In 2022, we have to do more to make sure that we are not just listening to the intra-party debate, but listening to what the voters are saying, the real world experiences people are dealing with. Yeah, but what are you offering the voters? Who are you? What do you represent? What are you fighting for? Simply saying like, we got to listen to everybody. That's not substance to me. That's not substantive. That doesn't tell me anything about who you are and what you represent.
So Anna, I'm gonna cut to the chase here, to the conclusion, and then I'm gonna go backwards and tell you amazing quotes from the story that show you that conclusion is correct. This is not an effort to bridge progressives and moderate Democrats at all. If it was, then you would have a policy discussion about how do we bridge those divides. We say Medicare should negotiate drug prices so we can have lower drug prices. They take money from drug companies and say, no, drug prices should be higher. Well, tell me how we bridge that divide. You guys are corrupt and we're not. No, I don't want to meet you halfway towards corruption. Anyways, no, this is an effort to say, oh, don't worry about all of your policies. We're not going to do any of them, but it doesn't matter because progressives and moderate Democrats are the same thing because they're now a hybrid. Now, who are they trying to trick? Because the older voters already listen to MSNBC and are brainwashed into corporate Democrats are the greatest thing in the world. So they don't need to convince those guys, they're already bought. What they're worried about, I don't mean bought in a bad way, like they're corrupt. No, the voters are not at all corrupt. They just bought into Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are the greatest thing on earth because Rachel Maddow told me. We're done with that. There's like, that's already hopeless. 100% cult, right? So they're trying to now brainwash the younger generation into saying, hey, don't worry about your policies. We're not gonna do your stinking policies. We're not gonna give you higher wages. We're not gonna give you health care, but I'm gonna give you a conservative Democrat that's completely owned by corporations, and I'm going to call them progressive, and I want you to not care about the difference. Okay, now here's how they're doing it. Now, for example, look at these absurdities. They say Eric Adams, the guy who just won the mayor's office in New York, they acknowledge because he's so conservative, painting him as a progressive would be absurd, right? So they say he's by no means a progressive hero. Wow. But they say, but he did get the endorsement of the city's biggest public sector union. Sorry, but Axios, right? You have no idea about current day politics. Giant unions almost always support the corporate Democrats, the more conservative Democrats. Now, does that make sense? No, it doesn't make any sense at all. But does that make you a progressive? Hell no. If you told me the nurses union is backing a candidate, I'd say, oh, then they're more likely to be progressive. If you tell me random giant union is supporting a Democrat, I would say they're more likely to be a conservative Democrat. I don't know why union leadership is weirdly maniacally conservative. I didn't do it. I'm against it, right? But you're a political reporter and you don't know unions generally back the more corporate candidate in Democratic primaries. You don't know that, you never heard of that. That's amazing. Now, she then later says, they're bucking ideological silos to try to build a winning coalition, these new candidates. Well, who the hell isn't trying to build a winning coalition? They make it seem like, oh, if you care about policy, that means you're not going to win. But if you care about building a winning coalition, then you'll shut up and do as your corporate donors tell you to do. They make it seem like progressives are so feckless and silly. Oh, winning, oh, we never even thought of that. Do we want to win? Do we want to build a winning coalition? Well, then we better listen to Alexi McCammon and sorry for the name, and Axios and all the corporate Democrats. Stop patronizing us, especially when you don't know a goddamn thing about politics. The Terry McAuliffe quote is just the nail in the coffin here, but more. They quote a Harvard Kennedy School of Institute of Politics saying that 76% of young voters rejecting partisanship and looking for, quote, more open-mindedness in politics. Now, that's a super interesting poll. And what it shows you is they're tired of calling themselves Democrats because they're younger and they're so progressive. And Democrat is becoming a toxic brand because it stands for doing nothing, right? And they take that amazing, interesting political fact and they turn it into, look at the twisting, look at the lies through the framing, right? They turn it into, that's why younger voters are saying they don't care if it's called progressive or moderate Democrat. That wasn't in the poll. That wasn't in the poll. You made that up so that you could try to trick younger voters. Now, remember when you said you loved moderate Democrats? No, they said the exact opposite. It's unbelievable. And then, Anna, before we get to McAuliffe, last one for me is, they say another Hillary Clinton alumni, because that's all they quote in the piece. I'm glad you're doing a hybrid of progressives and moderate Democrats when all you're doing is quoting the worst Democratic consultants in the country. Jesse Ferguson.
Quoting losers. Let's be clear about that. Losers, quoting losers.
So loser Jesse Ferguson said this to Axios: "It's more important for people to believe the candidate and see them as authentic than it is for them to have the right label on their jacket." Well, this piece says, do not be authentic, pretend you can't tell the difference between policies, and that progressives and corporate Democrats are the same. And you see how we're being authentic? No, you're trying to do marketing on behalf of your corporate crap and then call that authentic. And Axios goes, bravo, well played. Those were such excellent lies. Can we print them on your behalf? And they did.
And what's incredible is that they're just kind of like repackaging this and making it, with the help of Axios, making it appear as though they've come up with some groundbreaking, savvy strategy, which is laughable to say the least, because we've had issues for many election cycles involving Democrats who attempt to run as Republican light, and what happens? They get destroyed in midterm elections. They lose control of the House or they lose control of the Senate. It's just not a winning strategy. And to really reinforce the point that I'm trying to make here, Axios just keeps citing or quoting people who have lost in their elections, like Terry McAuliffe. So let me give that to you. In last fall's Virginia gubernatorial race, Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who fought for progressive touchstones like Medicaid expansion and increased ballot access in his state, was careful in appearing too far left in his race against conservative Republican Glenn Youngkin. How did that turn out for him? He lost. They continue to write, while McAuliffe invited and campaigned with Abrams, meaning Stacey Abrams, who also sent out fundraising appeals on his behalf, he avoided other prominent progressives. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told The Times. And it's just, it really does, it's incredible, because you're right, Cenk. This is a way to essentially shed any type of responsibility in real policy making, in fighting for actual substantive policies that would really fundamentally and materially improve people's lives. But also, in addition to that, this strategy, it rewards the kind of behavior that you see from conservative Democratic senators like Joe Manchin, right? It shows you that the party really values and upholds like the magic of incredibly divisive Democratic lawmakers like Joe Manchin, who has stood in the way of any real fundamental change, including the passage of the Build Back Better agenda. And real quick, I just wanted to give you guys an update on that. So everyone's in a tizzy because Manchin's doing what Manchin is supposed to do. This is Manchin's role. He has essentially said that he is not in favor of voting in favor of any Build Back Better agenda, including the pared back version of that legislation that he had proposed. According to Common Dream, Senator Joe Manchin came under fire Saturday after the Washington Post reported that the West Virginia Democrat, quote, does not currently support passing even his own recent $1.8 trillion counteroffer to President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. So what is the point of appealing to politicians like Joe Manchin within the Democratic Party when all they do is serve as a massive obstacle to what the Democratic Party's alleged agenda is? And I say alleged because we've seen just how weak Joe Biden and other Democrats have been in terms of fighting for the Build Back Better agenda, in terms of actually passing legislation that would actually increase social spending to improve people's lives.
Okay, if you're watching or listening to corporate media, you know what people normally call mainstream media, you're being lied to by serious professionals. They're professionally lying to you. So we told you that Joe Manchin is controlled by the millions of dollars that he gets in donations, and hence he would not do Build Back Better. He would either just water it down until only the corporate provisions were left in, or he would do nothing at all. They told you he was having an honest, principled debate, and that later he was gonna do it, and that decoupling it from infrastructure had nothing to do with it. His donors had nothing to do with it. His coal company had nothing to do with it. He's just such an honest politician, and he cared so much about the voters of West Virginia. We showed you the polling that the voters of West Virginia disagreed with him on all of the provisions by wide margins. Now, who was right and who was wrong? We were right. Joe Manchin killed it's such a joke. He killed his own proposal for Build Back Better. That's what that news story is. And corporate media still is like, I can't figure out why he did that. It's such a big mystery. Well, then you suck at your job and you should go retire, be a plumber. Be a plumber. You're not a reporter if you're not reporting the donations, or you think that millions of dollars does not affect a human being. So back to McAuliffe. Alexi McCammon, you might remember that name. We actually defended her. Why do we defend her? On policy or her writing, et cetera? No, because there was an absurd case of cancel culture against her when she became editor of Teen Vogue, okay? Because we are honest and principled. But I told you at the time, I don't really agree with her writing because she writes corporate drivel like this. To say that Terry McAuliffe, quote, fought for progressive touchstones like Medicaid expansion and increased ballot access. No, come on. You're either lying or you don't know one thing about politics. You think those are progressive touchstones? Medicaid expansion? No, that's the bare minimum. You don't know the progressives' policy is Medicare for all, universal health care, not tweaking expansion of Medicaid. You don't know that? Holy cow, you don't know that. It's increased ballot access. Every Democrat agrees to that. That's not a progressive thing or a moderate thing. And that is nowhere near progressive touchstones. That is the bare minimum for any Democrat. You don't know that? Come on. Now, either she knows it and she's getting a good laugh and her editors at Axios are getting a good laugh. Have we tricked younger voters into being hybrids yet so that corporate consultants can win? But my guess is that's not what's happening. It's less conspiratorial than that. They genuinely don't know a thing about politics. They just get paid to write this marketing. They're low-level marketing executives, and they just write this on behalf of corporate rule. And they don't even know that they're a machine, they're a cog in that machine. It's really sad.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.